careful, Chief. That elite was an ultra.
Gotta get a drink. Alright. The inspiration for today's discussion came from, there's this YouTube series that is frequently shilled by the most noble among us, Jacob Hansen. Frequently shilled by this Jacob Hansen guy. You may have known him, you may have heard of him, probably. He's out there trying in the trenches, trying to do all the apologetic stuff. I am kind of frequently annoyed by him, but he's out there. He's on our side, I guess, but that's how I feel about it. So, anyway, he recommends this video series about, it's like a in-depth apologetics about all the truth claims about the church. The guy who put it together, he seems like he put a lot of work into it. I think he's like a law student. And the first part's actually really interesting. It's based on a book where they go through all the witnesses of the Book of Mormon, and they kind of review them in the same way like a legal witness of a crime scene or something would be reviewed, and if we are able to dismiss them based on what we know about them. Pretty interesting. And then, as you go on through the video series, they get into the archaeology stuff, and as you know, the archaeology is a topic that is, I don't know, I just don't really care about it, because it's so lame. Oh my goodness, it is so lame. But anyway, so they're talking about the archaeology, and oh yeah, the Book of Mormon, it's in Guatemala. Yep, that's where it happened, in Guatemala, and or there's the Mayans, and like the swords weren't really swords, and this wasn't really that. The earthworks were really stoneworks, stuff like that. And it's just a little annoying. North doesn't mean north. South doesn't mean south. Yeah, okay. So it's just a little hard for me to wrap my head around. But anyway, so he's talking about the archaeology, and I'm like, okay, I'll listen to it. And he says, oh yeah, the only serious archaeological model of the Book of Mormon is Mesoamerica. That's the only serious one. And it's like, okay. And all these other ones, they're not really serious. Okay, got it. He keeps going on. And eventually he starts talking about how, the Nephites were just a tiny little culture that lived inside of the Mayan umbrella. So they weren't Mayan, but they lived in that area. And it's like the Mayans were super advanced, relatively speaking, and they had all these stoneworks. And I'm not going to say they weren't doing like human sacrifices, or maybe that's the Aztecs or whatever, but they're going around building stuff. They've got like the calendar and all that. And it's like, yeah, well, the Mayans were the Lamanites, and, they're actually more advanced. The Lamanites were probably more advanced than the Nephites. And, the Nephites, they were just racist, so they weren't really lazy and idolatrous and murderous people. That's just the Nephites being racist. And at that point, I was like, oh my gosh, wow. Look how they massacred my boy here. It's like, what is happening to us? We have to in order to feel good, in order to feel like serious archaeologists, in order to be knighted with the glorious title of serious archaeology, so that we can be held among the greats that are publishing all these PhD theses about some of the most silly, bizarre things you've ever heard. We really want to be considered serious by those sorts of people. And the price is that we have to label not only the founders of our religion, such as Joseph Smith, Brigham Young, all these guys, we have to label them racist, but we also have to label all of the Nephites racist. And the Lamanites, it was actually Wakanda, and they were super peaceful. Okay, let's just pack up here. So I was listening to this series, and I was feeling pretty hyped about some of the stuff about the witnesses. And then once we got to the Book of Mormon archaeology stuff, it's like, I think I don't want to believe in the Book of Mormon anymore. This is lame. This is really lame, actually. Actually, this book is lame. So, anyway, so that's kind of the thoughts that I felt. And it's like, why do we have to call everyone names, okay? And these labels, they didn't really exist back then. Like, they wouldn't even have understood what you were saying. Racist is a word that was invented recently, and it's basically just like a racial slur for white people. Because, you know, every white person is racist inherently. It's proven with facts and logic and science. Yeah, certainly true. Certainly 100% true. Unconscious bias. They did it with a little test at Harvard. Serious psychology over there. So yeah, the Nephites, they wouldn't have really understood what you were saying when you called them that. It's like, you guys are racist. And it's like, well, what do you mean? Well, you don't like Lamanites. And they're like, yeah. And they're like, well, you should like them. Oh, okay. Why? And it's like, well, because you shouldn't assume stuff about them. And they're like, the Nephites would be like, well, don't you trust your brother more than a stranger? Yeah. Okay. What about your cousin? Yeah. What about the kid who grew up in your neighborhood? Oh, yeah. Okay. So you're racist. No. Okay? No. Not me. You know, I have black friends. That's kind of how we go about it. And it's a little just pathetic at this point. No one cares. You know, no one really cares anymore. We're all tired of it. And some of these apologists, they're still worried about it. And they talk about, they're so worried about their image and being respectable that they literally lose the play here for the Book of Mormon. And it's just, it's a little annoying. So, yeah, and, you know, the Heartlanders, they can be a little kooky, you know. I like that they don't really care about quote-unquote serious archaeology. They're just kind of have their theory and they're just rolling with it. I like that. I do, I don't know, when they talk about, the one guy, he talks about Rod, I think, and he'll talk about how, like, the Earth is an ice crystal or something, and the core is an ice crystal, and I'm like, well, okay, what does this have to do with the Bible? But anyway, yeah, so Heartlanders, they're a little special, but we like them. And one thing's for certain, and that is that no serious archaeologist will ever prove the Book of Mormon true. Because if they found the evidence of the Book of Mormon, they would not be able to see it. Because the Book of Mormon is not serious archaeology in their worldview. So you're going to have to step outside of that worldview. And you are never going to be accepted back in. Okay? So these are the guys who say BCE. Okay? We really want to be accepted by them? The BCE guys. Yeah, they're going to find evidence in the Book of Mormon. It's going to be serious archaeology. Okay. Anyway. Okay, so were the Nephites racist? You know, and we're starting to have this problem here with, like, the Book of Mormon Illustrated Edition. Like, it's been revised, right? Because the previous one was a little too based for the children, okay? It was a little too awesome. So now we have the new one, and it's got, like, you know, it looks like it was drawn by, like, employees at Google. You know, Nephi, he's looking a little well done. And it's just, I don't know. I don't know what to think about it all. It's so weird that we're so concerned about it, okay? It's a book that was written hundreds of years ago that our critics don't even believe in. I don't know why we need to make it, like, more appealing to the people who say BCE. Do we really need to? Come on, guys. But we have a new narrative, you know, like, we're teaching the children with different pictures, and this will have very profound effects on the church. Within 20 years or so, 20, 30 years, like, the culture could be totally different. You know, the Book of Mormon videos, you know, everyone's looking pretty much the same. Everyone looks the same. And that's not apparent when you read the actual text of the Book of Mormon. But the Book of Mormon is not just a bunch of baby stories for children. It's not, oh, let's just reduce this into little drawings for kids. It is more than that. It is a serious book that deals about serious, hard topics. And it's given through, I mean, it's almost like allegory. And I'm not saying that, like, it's not based on true actual events. I believe that it is. Mormon, the narrator, he really saw our day. And the whole Book of Mormon, while it is a record of his people, it is also, I guess, a letter to us, right? At the same time. And so you can kind of think, oh, well, this is not only a story about the Nephites, but it is, words of warning or words of encouragement, words of hope, all of those things to us Latter-day people. And, Mormon, he seems very concerned that we will misidentify, good guys as bad guys as good guys, because, he sees how the world works and in today's world, and he's very worried about that. So he's very heavy-handed with saying, this guy was bad, this guy was good. And you see this throughout the whole Book of Mormon. He's always interjecting comments to say these guys are bad news. If you read the letter of Gideon High out of context, you might be like, these Nephite dudes, they're bad, they're real bad. Or if you saw what Moroni did to those kingmen, you might be like, oh man, this Moroni guy's bad news. But he interjects to say, Moroni's a good guy. He's like the best guy. I named my son after him. See, he's really good. And that's how Mormon operates throughout the whole Book of Mormon. But there's one story where he withholds judgment a little bit. And it's also a story that has kind of like the most subtle but also like super fast character development, and that is the story of Zeniff. So let's read the story of Zeniff. I'm going to open my little book to Mosiah 9 and read some of it for you. It says, the italics here, pretty inoffensive here. Good job, italics. Thank you very much. Verse 1, I, Zeniff, having been taught in all the language of the Nephites, and having had a knowledge of the land of Nephi, or of the land of our fathers' first inheritance, and having been sent as a spy among the Lamanites, that I might spy out their forces, that our army might come upon them, and destroy them. But when I saw that which was good among them, I was desirous that they should not be destroyed. So Zeniff, he's politically neutral. He's kind of like this bleeding heart liberal guy. It's like, come on, like the Lamanites, they're not so bad, It's kind of interesting. Verse 2, Therefore I contended with my brethren in the wilderness, for I would that our ruler should make a treaty with them. But he, being an austere and bloodthirsty man, commanded that I should be slain. But I was rescued by the shedding of much blood. For father fought against father, and brother against brother, until the greater number of our army was destroyed in the wilderness, and we returned. Those of us that were spared to the land of Zarahemla, to relate the tale to their wives and their children. This next verse is very complicated because Zeniff is insubordinate. His leader is kind of like a psycho, at least according to Zeniff. And it results in an argument. He's to be executed for his insubordinance, and then there's a mutiny, and everyone starts killing each other, their own families, over this whole argument over the Lamanites, which is very interesting. And Mormon does not interject to say, and Zeniff was totally right. And he doesn't interject to say, and the ruler, Zeniff's leader guy, he was a total jerk. He was a racist. He doesn't come in to say that, okay? It's more complicated than that. So verse 3, and it says, And yet, I being overzealous to inherit the land of our fathers, collected as many as were desirous to go up to possess the land, and started again on our journey into the wilderness to go up to the land. But we were smitten with famine and sore afflictions, for we were slow to remember the Lord our God. You can start to see there's a little bit of regret in his tone. There's this regretful nature about him killing his own brothers, and he's overzealous to inherit the land. And then he's also saying that we weren't as righteous as we were supposed to be. We weren't as faithful as we were supposed to be. So we were smitten with famine. And they find the place where their brethren were slain. It's this regretful tone. They eventually meet with the king, and he says, yeah, you can go to the land of Shalom. And if this king, he wants them to go build stuff, because he knows that they're going to build stuff, they're going to rehabilitate this city, and then he's going to have it. So, and then we start to see there's kind of a tone change in Zeniff's words. He says, Now it was the cunning and the craftiness of King Laman to bring my people into bondage, that he yielded up the land that we might possess it. So he's crafty, he's cunning. Verse 12, he says, Now they were a lazy and idolatrous people. Therefore they were desirous to bring us into bondage, that they might glut themselves on the labors of our hands, yea, that they might feast themselves upon the flocks of our fields. And the king of the Lamanites, he sends out soldiers to fight them. They have to defend themselves. Hundreds of the Nephites die. Thousands of the Lamanites die. There's all this needless violence that if Zeniff had just stayed in Zarahemla, none of this would have happened, right? We know that this was kind of church-sanctioned in a sense, because the government and the church are the same thing in the Book of Mormon, basically. You can kind of think of it as a government-sanctioned thing or like a church-sanctioned thing or both. Either way, it's probably valid ways of thinking about this. And it's just a disaster. It results in all this needless violence. All these Lamanites die, all these Nephites die. It's just bad. And it continues to be bad. And by the next chapter, the Nephites, they're putting guards around everywhere, the borders around their land. They're making sure no Lamanites are coming in. They're watching themselves. He's got spies. Like he has to create the NSA, essentially, to keep himself safe. He's got all these operatives out there watching. Yeah, and then they have to continue to defend themselves, even the old men and the young men. And they have to hide the women. And then verse 12, Mosiah 10 verse 12, here are his words now. He's changed even more. He says, "They were a wild and ferocious and bloodthirsty people, believing in the tradition of their fathers, which is this, believing that they were driven out of the land of Jerusalem because of the iniquities of their fathers, and that they were wronged in the wilderness by their brethren, and they were also wronged while crossing the sea." He continues to list, there's this list of grievances that they have against the Nephites, and these are what they use to justify violence against them. This is a reoccurring theme in the Book of Mormon. The historical grievances are not good, and they always result in violence that could have been avoided. He says, "And thus they have taught their children that they should hate them, and that they should murder them, and that they should rob them and plunder them, and do all they could to destroy them. Therefore they have an eternal hatred towards the children of Nephi. For this very cause has King Laman by his cunning and lying craftiness and his fair promises deceived me, that I have brought this my people up into this land, that they may destroy them. Yea, and we have suffered these many years in the land." At this point, Zeniff has fully realized how bad Laman, I guess at this point it's Laman's son who's now fighting him, but yeah, the original Laman, how bad he was, and how it was all just a ruse because they hate Nephites. And all this good that he saw in them, he doesn't seem so sure anymore. And then there's this whole story that ensues with King Noah. Zeniff's son, King Noah, and the whole family, the whole people that live there, they are corrupted morally, which probably wouldn't have happened if they had remained in Zarahemla. And they become degenerate. And this goes all the way into the church. Alma, who's the high priest, Alma the elder, and his associates, they're all corrupt. I would assume that Alma the elder is less corrupt, but maybe not. It doesn't say. You see, King Noah, he starts to act like a Lamanite king. He's doing like the laziness, idolatry. He's described in similar terms. He puts down the good priests, and he consecrates new ones. And their priesthood was still valid because, Alma the elder, he didn't get reordained. So the priesthood is still real, even in midst of all of this confusion and chaos. And that is an important lesson. King Noah, he becomes like a Lamanite king. He's basically enslaves his own people. And we have Abinadi, he tries to call him out. And he's in disguise, which is interesting for all those Mormon influencers who are so quick to call out all the anonymous trolls. You're just a troll. You're anonymous. Okay. Yeah. Toot my own horn here. Yeah, I did it. All right. What else happens here? So yeah, it's just a big nightmare. The people of Nephi are basically broken into 3 pieces because of Zeniff and his choices, which Mormon provides no commentary on, because I think he realizes that it's a very complicated thing, and I don't think he's just including these stories because it's good for the narrative flow. So the people of Alma, the elder, after Abinadi shows up, they break off from the people of Noah, who eventually King Noah is put down, and Limhi, who I believe is his son, is put in his stead. But even after they get rid of the wicked ruler Noah, they're still not in the land of Zarahemla, and they still got to get home. And the same thing with the people of Alma. Even though they decided to follow Abinadi and Alma and get baptized, they're still not home. They still have work to do. And we see their stories of how they are reunited and brought all back in together. And after this, and only after this, do we start to see a big change in the Nephite people. They change their entire structure of government, and they really start to make some progress towards becoming people of God. And we see after this, all this needless bloodshed caused by these decisions that are morally neutral, I suppose. Or at least the narrator provides no comment. He doesn't say, and Zeniff was totally misguided and stupid and bad and evil, and it's all his fault, and that doesn't happen, okay? And so we should try and be more like Mormon and realize that these are very delicate subjects. But anyway, so, during this time period, the scouts are sent out to try and, I'm getting mixed up here, but scouts are sent out to try and find Zarahemla, or, I'm mixing up who's sent out the scouts, but the scouts get sent out, they get lost, and they find the jaredite plates, and after the people of Nephi are broken into pieces and brought back together, it is because of this whole fool's errand of Zeniff, it is because of that the Nephites are able to get the jaredite plates, they're able to get the reign of the judges, and it's because of these experiences that the sons of Mosiah are able to be successful missionaries to the Lamanites. And so what do? They go individually, they don't bring their wives and their children, and they don't go to establish a nice, wealthy society within striking distance of the Lamanites. They don't do this stuff. They have totally different tactics, and the tactics work. And they're able to convert like a whole group of them. And they're the people who become the anti-Nephi Lehis. And they bury their swords in the ground. And this whole narrative of, I was wronged in the wilderness, and you stole from us, and all this stuff, all of that gets buried in the ground too. It is gone. And they totally reject their identity as Lamanites, becoming the non-Nephite descendants of Lehi, right? It is a very profound lesson. And then, it is no longer safe for these anti-Nephi Lehis, the people of Ammon, to live in the Lamanite lands. It is no longer safe for them. And so the Nephites bring them home. But do they bring them to the land of Zarahemla? They do not. They don't do that. They take them and they get their own land of inheritance, which is called the land of Jershon. And I would be very curious to know how defensible attacks from the land of Jershon, if some invaders were to come from the land of Jershon, I'd be curious what the geography is and how defensible that is if you live in Zarahemla. And my guess is that it would be defensible. But it is also a good place to defend from the Lamanites. And so these anti-Nephi Lehis, they get a separate land of inheritance. And that's just what the book says, okay? And it's very insightful, and there's a lot that we can learn about it with what's going on here in our world. And there's kind of that message of hope that even through these fool's errands that result in a lot of bad things, at the end of it, God provided a way for the people of Limhi with the wine to get home. He provided a way for the people of Alma to get home. And those scouts who got lost, He provided a way for them to get home. And they were able to bring the plates home. And He provided a way to translate it. And all the horrible things they learned about King Noah, King Mosiah is able to foresee more problems and is able to prevent those. At the end of all this tragedy caused by Zeniff, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And so I think, to go back to what started this all, I think to label, the Nephites were racist, and, the Lamanites weren't really ferocious. They weren't really murderous. They didn't really have to hide their sisters and their wives and their children in the bushes when the Lamanites came to attack, okay? They didn't really have to do that. They didn't really get blamed for the actions of the Lamanite priests. Okay, they weren't really driven from their homes repeatedly. They weren't really eradicated off the face of the earth, okay? So that's my thoughts about all that. Okay, we cannot slander the Nephites like that. They're real people. Real stuff really happened to them. Mormon really saw our day. And it's not just a bunch of story for babies. There's some complicated ideas there to think about. And we can pretend all we want that Nephi didn't say, look, there's the Mother of God. Wow, she is the whitest woman I've ever seen. She's the fairest woman I've ever seen. Fair just means pretty. Does it? I don't know. Does it really just mean pretty? He saw a vision of pilgrims coming to America, of settlers coming to America. And he says, they're like unto my people before they were slain. So he said that. What does that mean? I've heard some people say that Freemasonry comes from the Nephites, and that's why it was in Britain, because the British have Nephite blood, just a little bit. And that would coincide with the promise that God made to Nephi that his descendants would not be entirely swept from the earth, that they would remain in part. Well, maybe that's talking about Native Americans. Maybe it's talking about the British. We don't know. I think the world is far more connected, and our ancestry is far more connected with the people of the Book of Mormon than we may ever realize. So yeah. I just had to correct that slander against the Nephites by so-called apologists. It's done so in passing and without thought. This post-1960s world and the fog, or whatever you want to call it, is like so thick over our eyes that like we can't even hear what we're saying, and it is absurd. Okay? So what do we need to take away from this? I think what we need is a plan to return to Zarahemla. That's what we need. Because anyone who, if you spend enough time learning about the history of the church, it becomes very apparent that we are off the rails a little bit, okay? It's just true. I'm not in charge of driving the church. I don't know how much of it is strategy and how much of it is these consultants and assistants and secretaries who are plugged into their phones. They're plugged into the matrix. They're the ones who are talking to all the leadership. So I don't know how much of it is strategy. I don't know how much of it is that, how much of it is protecting tax status. But I don't know. I don't see what the long play is here. It doesn't feel like we have a plan to return to Zarahemla, and I think that we need one. And I think that it is achievable. We can talk about different ideas, specific ideas I have in another day of like actual things we could do to activate the culture. But the culture is there. The faith is there. I was in Sunday school fairly recently, and we were talking about miracles. I believe it was one of the end of the year lessons. And it was possibly the most boring lesson ever. The lesson was almost over, and I was 100% convinced that no one in the room even believed in miracles. It was just kind of, sometimes good things happen, I guess. Like that was like the extent of what people had to say about miracles. Towards the end, a brother raised his hand and he said, on my mission, I received a priesthood blessing and was healed instantly. Miracles are real. Priesthood blessings are real. That was basically his testimony. And I was like, wow. And it was a pretty powerful story. And then several other people got like really excited, and they also shared similar stories about how they were immediately healed through prayer, or through a blessing, or through a semi-miraculous appearance or sensation or feeling, that they were healed by these things. And I was like, wow, this place is just brimming with the Spirit, like the Spirit in the room, or the feeling in the room, whatever you want to call it, totally changed. And there was just power. And I was just convinced. I was like, this moldering crust, there's this, you could say it's a thin crust of the earth over the mantle, or is it an ice crystal? I don't know. You have to ask one of these Heartlanders. I don't know. but yeah, beneath that crust there's a lot of faith there, and they can be activated. The Alma the Elder, wicked, but through Abinadi, things changed. And I'm not talking about Russell M. Nelson. Okay, so this is a more general principle. Okay, so don't think that's what I'm saying. Russell M. Nelson. You can be mad about Russell M. Nelson. Some people are mad about him. Other people are mad about Hinckley. Other people are mad about Kimball, David O. McKay, Heber J. Grant, Joseph F. Smith, Wilford Woodruff. I always almost say Woodrow Wilson, but Wilford Woodruff. You name it, they're mad about it. So it's more of a general principle. There's different groups of people who say, that's the prophet who ruined it all. That's the one. And I reject that. I reject that mentality entirely. I think that the priesthood is real, and it existed even in Alma the Elder, who was wicked. And when the faith of the people, including Alma, was activated, the priesthood power still there, still accessible. And so when these people, they had their plans to return to Zarahemla with the wine or with through revelation of warnings about the Lamanites attacking them and being guided through the wilderness. Like, that power was still there, and that is the power that I believe in. It is a faith-based power, and so we, as a people, we can make our plan to return to Zarahemla. We can go to the Nephite tower, and we can say, 3rd Nephi, they go to the tower, they say, please, Nephi, please end the famine. We humble ourselves, we can do this, Or Laman and Lemuel, wicked, right? Wicked people. They go to the prophet, they untie him from the mast, the Liahona, it starts working, right? Are you starting to get it here? If the children of Israel had gone to Moses and said, we are sorry, we're burning down this calf, and please put those pieces, let's pick the pieces up. We're sorry, Moses, put the pieces back together. We will live the higher law. This is the attitude that God wants out of us. It is the willingness, it is the contrite spirit, and you can find reasons to be mad about every single prophet since the dawn of time, I'm sure. After Enoch, it's all just a bunch of baloney. I'm sure that guy's up there in spirit prison. He's still going on. Everything was fine with Enoch, but then he left. He flew away with the city of Enoch, and we all got left on earth, and it's just been terrible ever since. So enough of that attitude. That attitude is the loser mentality. That's the we're stuck in Lamanite territory mentality. We're going to be stuck there forever mentality. We're going to be in bondage. We need the mentality to get back to Zarahemla. Okay? You can complain and say, oh, Limhi, your dad was such a bad guy. You can get rid of King Noah all you want. It's not getting you back to Zarahemla, okay? You can tie him to a tree. You can do your thing. It's not getting you back to Zarahemla. And King Noah, he was actually a bad dude. He got what he deserved. But that's not what I'm saying. I'm trying to make a more general point about attitude. So that's your lesson about the Book of Mormon. It is a very awesome book, okay? So actually read the words on the actual pages, Do not be tempted to simply color it in like a giant coloring book for children, okay? And say, this is what this word means. This is what this verse means. No, they can mean lots of things at the same time. Don't paint yourself into a corner, literally, on what the Book of Mormon means. Because we believe all things. We believe all truth. Don't pigeonhole scriptures into meaning certain things. And don't slander. Do not slander the Nephites when you're making apologetic YouTube series. Don't call them racist. Take it back. Take it back, Jacob Hansen, or your friend, or whatever his name is. I don't care. Take it back, okay? Take it back. Those are my thoughts for today. Hope you have a good one. Stay faithful.